Welcome. My name is Will Torres. I am one of the admission officers here at the Stanford Graduate School of Business. I am so thrilled to be joined by our panelists today. To get us started, we're going to be talking about the entrepreneurial resources at the GSB. And not so much me talking, but we're going to start with a framework and some of the different opportunities here. And then we're really going to get into it with our panelists. So at the GSB, it's not just entrepreneurship, but really, how do we develop that entrepreneurial spirit and approach to the problems you have in your everyday? At the GSB, there's over 60 courses that have some element of entrepreneurship embedded into them. And there's 5 different pillars for how we approach entrepreneurship. Looking through the offerings of our Center for Entrepreneurial Studies, as well as the Center for Social Innovation. This comes to life in so many different ways on campus. And today we're going to be joined by 3 of our either current students or alumni who can speak to this experience firsthand. So with that brief intro, which we knocked it out. Let's meet our panelists, and then we'll be spending about 55 minutes together. And we're going to do everything we can to answer as many questions as possible. All right. So let's go ahead and meet our panelists. If we can go left to right, please. So Jacqueline, get us started. Tell us a little about yourself and what was a memorable course that you took at the GSB?
Cool. Thanks, Will. Hi, everyone. My name is Jacqueline Chen. I'm dialing in from New York City. Before business school, I worked in financial services. So I did investment banking and late stage private equity investing, also focused in financial services. I went to Stanford because I wanted to transition from, the very buttoned up industry of private equity into launching something of my own. And to be quite honest, I wasn't sure if I had the gall to really start my own company, but I think bit by bit and quarter by quarter, and taking advantage of a lot of the resources on campus, I decided after business school that I wanted to really strike out on my own. And 2 years later, I'm running a seed stage startup. We're 14 people. The company's called Benepass, and we help companies administer and distribute employee benefits.
Nice. And then Jacqueline, one of the questions that I often get when folks are applying to the GSB, they're interested in entrepreneurship. Did you have an idea of what you wanted to do, like an idea for that company or business already, or did you just know that you wanted to lead something of your own?
I didn't have a specific idea. I just thought it would be cool to start something of my own. I'd been reading a lot about startups, and it seemed like people had a really incredible learning experience. Obviously, there's a high variability in the outcome, but and there was a path I think in which I could have stayed in private equity. I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do, but being at business school, I think really solidified this path for me.
Thank you. Shawan.
Hi, everyone. I am Shawan. My pronouns are he, him, and I'm originally from the suburbs of Chicago. Before graduate school, I spent time in the Dominican Republic with an education nonprofit and then did a couple of years of consulting with Deloitte. And I came into grad school because I wanted to go back to the nonprofit sector and was thinking about launching my own nonprofit. And while I was at the GSB, I explored an idea for a nonprofit that I am now building and leading full-time called Vocal Justice. And we empower Black and Brown youth to become socially conscious leaders through a culturally affirming public speaking program. A course that's memorable that I took at GSB was Social Innovation Practicum, where it was a forcing function to actually build out this idea that I had in my head, where every class the professor said, come in with your theory of change, come in with your landscape analysis, come in with your metrics for success. And then they brought in guest speakers from the education space and from the nonprofit space to give us feedback on that content. And my professor for that class actually connected me to one of my biggest mentors now, who's a GSB alum, who's been guiding me as I've been building Vocal Justice.
Nice. Have there been any moments of feedback or advice that just really struck you and had you just open your eyes in a new way?
Oh, I'm like, how much time do I have? Yes. The biggest one that I got was summer 2020. It was the start of the pandemic, and our model beforehand had been me going to schools piloting this program. And we had a lot of success with that. But my mentor said, I know you want to transition to training teachers on how to do this. Why not do that virtually right now since everything is virtual? I was really scared about transitioning to that model too early, but it ended up being a huge win for our organization. So we now have 15 educators across the country who facilitated our program with their students, and we're able to go from working with like 15 to 20 students at a time to about 200. And now we have this impact with teachers and students. So I'm really glad my mentor came in and said, hey, rethink your model early on and take advantage of the whole way that the pandemic shifted things so that we can reach more people.
Awesome. Ricardo.
Hi, everyone. I'm Ricardo. I am currently a MBA student. Will be in my second year coming up in September. So currently right now I'm doing an internship in venture capital at a firm called FinTech Collective out of New York City. Before coming to do my MBA, I was a quantitative trader at Goldman Sachs, and then I went to work at a hedge fund. I was running a trading desk there, and then I also worked at a couple startups and tried to start 2 companies in my first year at Stanford, and yeah, just took full advantage of all the resources that I could get at the university through the Center for Entrepreneurial Studies and Venture Studios and all that. I took Startup Garage my first year, and also took Hacking for Defense, which is kind of unreal to take 2 of the experiential classes in 1 year, but I had a ton of fun, and frankly, those were the best experiences that I had, just learning from people who have been through this, time and time again, and meeting a bunch of people that are, have a lot of, interesting ideas about how the future should look, and trying to be kind of a driver for that. So yeah, look forward to speaking with you all.
Nice. And then earlier you mentioned you were like trying to launch a few things at the beginning. You're doing VC now. How do those pieces fit together? How have you evolved over your time at the GSB so far?
Yeah, so I think for me, doing an internship in venture capital was a way for me to meet more entrepreneurs, talk to more individuals who are starting companies, and really get a feel for how they work, how they think, how they make decisions, how they think about the problems that they're trying to solve. And it's been great. I mean, in the time that I've been doing this, I've probably chatted, like no joke, with like 100 different founders. And that experience is, has been super beneficial. And I think for me, it's really about trying to, I don't know, go down one of 2 paths. Either A, try to find a way to make venture capital industry more beneficial for founders who are trying to start good companies, or B, like really find something that I'm passionate about and just dive into that, right?
Nice. I have a feeling kind of finding something that you love and really diving into it might be a theme in some way, shape, or form over today's conversation. So I'm going to stop sharing. That way we can focus on each other. For our attendees, please feel free to already start popping your questions into that Q&A box. We'll be interspersing them throughout the session and then really diving into that Q&A box towards the end. Don't forget that there is that upvote tool. So if you see a question that you also want to see answered, go ahead and click that, and that'll help that rise through the list. Okay, so as we're talking about the entrepreneurial resources, Startup Garage and the experiential element of it, starting with maybe some of the folks who took it, can you tell us a little bit more about Startup Garage and what that was like?
I can start.
Yeah.
So I did an unusual route of taking Startup Garage in my first year. So we weren't allowed to take it as first years in the fall quarter. So I did the winter quarter, and I was able to do that because I had started the company that I was working on before even coming to the GSB. So I already had some traction, and we had to put together a deck and everything to display that was the case. So there is an application process if you're going through, oh, actually, either way, there's an application process, but there's an application process. You put together effectively a deck, which is very, very similar to what you would show to, a venture capital firm if you were trying to raise capital at the time, right? Though it's, lower stakes in some sense, maybe, but you do get a lot of help from the Startup Garage community to, help you put that together. Once you get into the course, series of 10 weeks, you get matched with a partner or an advisor. Our advisor was like an awesome individual. It was like the ex-CMO of eBay, and just like incredible people that we were matched up with. You get matched up with like an operating person to help you on the operating side, and a person to help you from the teaching team, who also the individuals that are on the teaching team are just like incredible, experienced individuals as well. And then you go through the process of the like lean startup methodology, right? You create hypotheses, you do tests to test them out. The school provides resources. We ran a couple ad campaigns, for example, that we got resources from the school to pay for. We went through and built our prototypes and talked to a ton of people and got feedback, and it was really taken seriously. I think that the whole intention of that class is really to just get you to start something for real and connect you with people who are going to help you be successful.
And then Jacqueline, you took Startup Garage as well. Correct?
I did. I was a bit more of a late bloomer. So I took Startup Garage my second year. I took for the first quarter and the second quarter. And I think, what's great about Startup Garage is that it's a mix of folks in terms of whether or not you're 100% sure you're going to start something of your own. So I think, in my team of 4 people that I took the class with, 2 people joined early stage startups after business school, and 1 person went into venture. And then I'm, of the 4, the person who went on and actually start something. And so I think what's great about that class is that you get a mix of all those, like it's a big class. And so everyone has like a slightly different orientation. And so on one end of the spectrum, you have folks who just want to understand what that lean methodology is. And on the other hand, you have folks who 100% knew, like Ricardo, maybe, that like he had a specific idea in mind and wanted to focus on that. So that was a really great experience for me second year to kind of solidify some of the to undo kind of what I had been trained in, which is like very process driven, very buttoned up, very, dot all of your I's and cross all of your T's, to a startup mindset of you just try something, you throw it out there in the world, you get some feedback, you fix it, you try it again, rinse and repeat, with a much higher like feedback loop. And so kind of unorienting myself from like a previous mode of operation to this newer, scrappier side is a bit of a transition, or at least it took a little bit of time to get comfortable with that.
Yeah, and so you mentioned some of your original group mates, now they're all doing different things. So one question I often get is, what if I'm not sure I want to be an entrepreneur, but I want to take the classes? How welcoming is it, A, for folks who are interested in the field, but also for folks who might be dabbling or there to learn? Like, how can you tell us a little bit about that mix?
I think Startup Garage is very friendly to everyone across that spectrum. And frankly, people change partway through. So I would say one of my classmates, I think I think he could have been 50-50, and then he just decided ultimately, like, he didn't have, one specific idea. He didn't have like one specific, it didn't feel like the right time in his life to start something, but he still, I think, has in the back of his head that he'll do it eventually. So I think Startup Garage in particular is very welcoming to that. There are other resources, similar classes to Startup Garage in the D school and in the engineering school, that are called either Lean Launchpad or Launchpad. They're confusingly named very similar things, but those are a bit more intense, if you will. And I think for folks who are like very, very focused on it, but I would say Startup Garage is very friendly to any, from light interest to heavy interest.
Yeah, I would very much agree with that. I think that it's like anything else in the world. It's kind of like you get out of it what you put into it type of situation. And I think a lot of people go into the process looking for team members who, will work well together. And even if they don't necessarily all agree on the idea, or they don't all have an idea to pursue, I think the part of the process is to learn how to work well in a team in an entrepreneurial environment, and just follow whoever becomes the de facto leader in pursuing that idea. And I think a lot of people have been very amenable to that, and the teaching team is recognizes that not every group that's in the class is going to go off and raise funds and become a startup. So they curate the content to make it very very accessible for folks who are going to end up being in either at a venture capital firm or in a corporate setting, but like want to have that entrepreneurial sort of drive as well.
While we're on the topic of experiences and courses, Shoan, there's a question from Marco here about kind of prioritizing opportunities, especially if you're thinking about taking classes from other places on campus. I know you talked a little bit about that intersection of education. Can you share a little bit about how you approach that?
Yeah, so coming into GSB, knew I wanted to do one of two things afterwards. It was either join an existing education nonprofit or start my own. So I decided to prioritize classes that would help me do that. I personally wasn't looking to explore that many other topics outside of education and social justice in terms of issue area. And so classes that were specifically speaking to that got to the top of the list for me. And then the other choice that I made around prioritization was around skill set. So a lot of students in my class were asking this question: should I focus more on the hard or technical skills, or should I focus on more of the soft skills like communication and team management? And I recognized that my bread and butter was not going to be crunching numbers, doing financial analysis, and that I just needed the fundamentals when it came to that. So I leaned more into classes that were about how can you hire well, how can you make sure you have equity in terms of your company culture, and how can you actually manage your team, especially in a remote setting, since I knew that might be an option for vocal justice. So ended up doing lots of education, nonprofit work, and the soft skills classes while I was at GSB.
Nice. And then there's a lot of really interesting questions. There's a lot of interest in that startup garage experience and a lot of the kind of experiential places on campus. Like, how would you talk about the timing of them? Would you do that early on? Do they come later in your second year? I know there's a couple different paths here, and then also what's typical at the GSB. Can someone share a little bit, maybe Jacqueline, since you referenced it first, like what that timeline could look like for folks?
Yeah, so Startup Garage is commonly taken your second year in the fall quarter. That's the biggest class. And then should you choose to continue, you can continue on into winter quarter. And then some overachievers like Ricardo can get in winter quarter without having done the fall quarter, which is definitely an option, but is less common. And then I believe the engineering school's lean launchpad is in the winter quarter, and then the D school's launchpad is in the spring quarter. Those two classes are more by application, and you have to have a team and have some demonstrated not traction, but demonstrated experimentation already happening. So it does take some pre-planning to apply in order to have a successful application to those two classes. And then in the summer, I did something called Entrepreneurial Summer Program, whereby I interned at a seed stage company. It was 10 people in a room, and Stanford supported part of my compensation for the summer to enable me to work there. So that's a summer program. And I think there's lots of other resources year round as well.
Ricardo or Shoan, for courses that do involve a group, did you know the people on the outset? What are some different ways to help you meet people who you might be able to work well with?
Sure, I can speak to that. So I was looking at courses that were in the social innovation space, and the Center for Social Innovation hosted lots of mixers, too many to keep up with, at the start of the year, where you would show up to the event, you would actually get different stickers to represent issue areas that you were passionate about, whether it's education or youth development or healthcare. Put those stickers on and then network with other people that way. And then through some of those events, you might meet people who want to support you with your venture or take a class with you. And then when you're enrolled in some of the social innovation classes, they'll send out a spreadsheet with ideas that people have, and then facilitate introductions for you if you want to get connected to other people. And then if you can't find a group of people to work with within your class, you can always talk to the professor and pursue your own thing alone. And they're really supportive of that, which is what I ended up doing in my social innovation practicum course.
Nice. There's a question here from Kibwe. And Shoan, earlier you mentioned knowing that like crunching numbers was not necessarily going to be your skills, your like bread and butter. And as you think about like some of the core experiences and skill sets that a leader needs. It's like understanding your own needs versus what things people on your teams can do. And this is a question for all three of you. Um, what were some skills that you felt really comfortable with, and what were ones that you were looking for others to contribute? And how did you either discover that? Was it trial and error? Did you already know from the outset? And anybody can jump in on this one.
Yeah, one thing I would say is just a general sense of like drive to understand the entrepreneurial process was like important, just generally for people to be bought into the experience. I think that was that's important, and that was reflected immediately. If you met somebody that was at one of these team formation events, there's a good chance that they're trying to figure that out. And then kind of, through discussion in those events, you get a sense of how much bought into the idea they are. The other thing I would say is around like complementary skill sets. That was super important as well. So like I have a certain type of skill set, and I was looking for individuals who are kind of like the opposite of me, right? Because it doesn't make sense for me to look for folks that are more of me to some extent. And that ended up working up really well for the team that I had for Startup Garage. I'm not like the most organized person, but my the partner that I had for Startup Garage just probably could be like an amazing logistics expert or something, right? But so that ended up working out really, really well.
I would say like the traditional answer, I think, is to to put it very bluntly, business people want to find an engineer. Like that was like the common trope, if you will, among, founders in, I guess, the GSB class. I attempted to at Stanford, didn't work out for me, but ultimately like my two technical co-founders at Benepass are people through my GSB network. So one was in my pass down house my second year. He was the only non-GSBer in our house. And then the other guy, Kabir, I met through a GSBer who had known him from a previous life. So I think there are some people who felt pressure, I guess, to find the perfect person to like partner with and be a co-founder with while on campus. And I certainly felt that pressure, but it kind of worked out for me after the fact as a result of the GSB network. So that's kind of like additional perspective I would provide there. In addition to what Ricardo said, obviously you want people who are like who are interested and aligned with kind of what you want to put into the class. Some of the classes, I think in particular, the engineering version of it and the D school version of it, basically everyone has to like really commit. This is going to be your top priority that quarter. The same isn't necessarily true of Startup Garage, although you could, want to put yourself in a group where all four of you kind of are aligned on that point. But that's a bit more on the, I guess, soft side as opposed to like hard skills assembling.
Yeah. And you mentioned something really interesting, Jacqueline, the network. And so thinking about we're talking a lot about the resources during your time at the GSB, but your career and whether you start entrepreneurship immediately after or down the line, or you pivot around a couple different places, that's like a lifelong path. So maybe starting with Shawan and Jacqueline, like now that you're out, how have the Stanford network supported you in this endeavor? And then Ricardo, as a current student, are you experiencing that as well? And like how are the outside kind of post GSB family members helping you out? So maybe we can start with Shawan since
yeah. So I'm grateful that I have a fellowship through the Center for Social Innovations, Social Innovation Fellowship that supports early stage social entrepreneurs. And through that, I get a coach who works for the Center for Social Innovation, and I meet with her every 2 weeks to walk through my idea. And so that's been incredible as I'm building an organization, hiring my first employee, to have somebody who's affiliated with that team to just give me real-time feedback and be a sounding board for me. And then the alumni network is also incredible. I have not tapped into it enough because I'm still breathing after graduating just a few months ago, but I know that there are tons of listservs with entrepreneurs affiliated with the Venture Studio at Stanford that you can blast out to if you need advice on anything. I see emails coming into it all the time. And so as I'm getting ready to do fundraising in the future and building out the organization more, I'm definitely going to be cold emailing a lot of GSB alum. And I've heard from friends that the response rate is really high when you contact somebody from the network.
GSB Network is very strong in my entrepreneurship life. I think had I not gone to the GSB, I don't think I would have ended up down this path. I would say in terms of kind of so my co-founders aren't GSBers, but like I said, I met them through my GSB network, like one connection removed. I am in a kind of CEO support group among founders in our class, and all of us have, some of us are doing like mentor-backed startups, other folks did search funds, so kind of the different types of the different flavors of entrepreneurship that Will had mentioned early on in the slides. And then in addition, I've also taken venture funding from folks in the GSB network. Several classmates are on my cap table. So there's like kind of that financial support as well. And so definitely there's the network brings so much, or it has brought at least so much to my experience with entrepreneurship that, it's everywhere, and it's definitely been a huge help to date.
Yeah, and I would just say, like, during the while you're a student, it's still like massively impactful. I would say the reason I have the internship I have is because of a MBA too that was the intern the previous year at the same firm, and the connections that I had through them, and like the kind of insight that I had about the firm, and kind of the process and the people and everything that was shared through having that person in my network. And then in addition to that, I would say it's just being at the GSB, especially in the time that you're there, to Shawan's point earlier, like the response rate that you get on emails to individuals that you reach out to is like incredibly high, right? So of 150 emails that I sent out to VCs, I had chats with like probably 50 of them, right? Which is crazy. And some of these are partners at really, really important firms. And those experiences are what have allowed me to be able to have the insights that I have now, really, right? So without that, it would be very difficult to have done that with without having had a background in venture or entrepreneurship before coming to the GSB.
Yeah, I think we're kind of alluding to this already, but maybe if we can distill even further and take a moment, we're going to jump into the Q&A box. There's a question here from Tian Yin about comparing, like, if you were to go into entrepreneurship without an MBA, how does your GSB experience bring some unique values or kind of perspectives to like the things that you're interested in? So take a moment. Versus no MBA, or like with a now the GSB experience, like how do you think it's different, or where's the value in pursuing the MBA if you're thinking about going into entrepreneurship? This one's for anybody on the panel.
I can kick it off. So a couple things come to mind. First, I think that Stanford teaches entrepreneurship in a way that's about the process as opposed to about a specific idea. And I think that is something that was a mindset shift that was pretty strong for me, because I always thought, oh, these people started a company because they had one specific idea. And until I got to Benepass, I recycled, there were a graveyard of ideas, if you will. And this one worked out because of a series of, testing, talking to customers, prototyping, that whole process. And I think, again, you can probably read a book and understand this is not rocket science. But at the same time, getting to put it into practice with mentors along the way is the value of being in a school environment. And then the second thing I'd say is that around like the network, absolutely, we kind of already touched upon that already. And that's a huge help to like building your business over time. And then after a certain point, and I feel like I'm currently making this transition now, is we are a seed stage company, we're going to grow. And now my job has quickly transitioned from being just a scrappy early stage, get things done as quickly as possible, to transitioning to be a leader of my company. And there are a lot of things that, I mean, I'm not making the transition perfectly, but there's lots of, those are different jobs and different functions. And so I think a lot of entrepreneurs, perhaps without their MBA, can kind of chance into it because they have a great idea and it just starts taking off, but you might not have the foundational skills around how to be a good leader, how to be a good communicator, how to build team morale. All of these things are really crucial to make your company become a bigger company that's gonna, that's gonna stand the test of time. And so that final piece of the skill set is absolutely something that I learned at Stanford and continue to put into practice. And I don't think I would have, I mean, again, I could read a book, but I don't think it would have sunk in as much as it did had I not gone to the GSB.
See lots of head nods from the panel.
Yeah, I would just add to that I think that the sort of like being able to have the time to test and try things out was super critical, right? So like you're spending 2 years here that you would otherwise be spending at work or whatever, and you'd be super busy. I can't tell you how much time I've had to be able to reflect on, kind of myself and the experiences that I have, and also try a lot of different things out in different industries and, different areas of knowledge that I wouldn't have had time to explore before. And I think what that does for the entrepreneurial experience is really just allow you to do that testing without, kind of any unforeseen kind of losses or potential losses, and allows you, to Jacqueline's point, to kind of really, really understand the process and not really, have to be focused on the idea itself generally.
And I'd add two things to that. One, there's a joke at GSB that everybody has been a startup founder, is thinking about being one, will be one day. And so you're just surrounded by people who understand that world, which for me was really helpful to build my confidence when it came to pitching. There's so many of my friends who are saying, oh, you should ask for even more money for yourself, for the organization. And this is how you tactically can go about doing it, because they understand what it's like to put yourself out there and the importance of making a big ask. And I think because I learned that from people who are a part of this entrepreneurship world, it helped us to secure more funding for the organization. And then the second piece is building on what Ricardo was saying, that not only do you have the space to reflect on ideas, but you also can get some funding to do so. The Center for Social Innovation has a fellowship called the Impact Design Immersion Fellowship for people who want to explore ideas in the social innovation space between their first and second year at GSB. And I did that fellowship and got funding, thankfully, for 10 weeks to explore this idea, talk to students about their experience, connect with school leaders. And that was awesome, just to learn more about it. And that's not something I could have done if I were working full time, both because I didn't have the time to do it or the money to support it.
Great. There's a question here from Aditi. We've focused a lot on kind of experience, and my suspicion is most of your work is here in the US, kind of domestically, but maybe it's in other experiences or things that your classmates have done. Are there resources for people looking at startups aiming to address issues in other countries? Any insights on that would be awesome.
Well, first and foremost, I think like the package that you get when you come, if you say that you have a startup and you're a Stanford student from the Stanford Venture Studios, is blind to where you're operating, just first and foremost. And all of the resources that they put through, for example, like connecting you to lawyers or accountants and things like that, they often will make a point to do things for specific industries and specific regions. So they would do things for social innovation, for example, specifically, but then also for international things as well. So they do have a lot of content that they cater specifically for that.
Has anybody seen like maybe classmates trying to launch things internationally, or have you heard anything from that front?
Yeah, there's a company from my class called Ajaib, which is a robo-advisor in Indonesia. I think overall, like, it's a process, not the idea, and that also applies to whether it's US or international. at the end of the day, you're trying to solve a problem or, a pain point as it's called. And that exists everywhere in many different forms. So it's more about the process as opposed to, a specific idea.
Great. And so kind of on that similar theme of process versus idea, are folks able to apply the process to an idea they had before the GSB in some of these classes, or are these ideas that had to have come up at the GSB?
Can definitely be something you had before GSB or came up with at GSB. I had my idea of similar version before, actually when I was applying to GSB that I remember writing about in my application. And then when I got to GSB, I just started exploring it through coursework. Other people set up weekly chats with friends to just brainstorm a ton of ideas and then decide which one they want to explore while they're there.
My friend Chad Monroe from my class runs a startup called Jupiter with two of our classmates now. When he first got to campus, I think the original format of his idea was shipping things from the US outside via, it was to bring goods that like weren't otherwise accessible outside the US. And now it's a last mile grocery delivery company. And that evolution kind of took place while we were at the GSB. And in route, he got, two other GSB co-founders and an engineer from an undergrad, I think. So anyway, all that is to say, like, you can definitely start, early, bring people along, look for people to join you on your ride. Your idea will probably change, and, international or US, I think that's all. The world is your oyster.
Question about funding. So getting resources and funding is going to be a big part of the entrepreneurial journey. There's a question from Joshua about resources to help you pitch to venture capitalists for seed funding. Any experiences on that front?
I mean, I would argue that the winter quarter of Startup Garage is designed to help you design your pitch deck. Like that's the unsaid kind of intention. And at the end of that that class, you do actually get to pitch live to a couple of venture capitalists that are invited by the teaching team. And when I say a couple, I don't mean like 2 or 3. I mean there was like 10 of them there, right? So like, and they're all very related to your the area that you're looking to raise from. And from that class, there have been a lot of people who have gone forward and raised capital. The same experience, I had the same exact experience in Hacking for Defense. At the end, a bunch of people pitched, some people actually got funded, right? So the resources are there. And same thing with Stanford Venture Studios. Throughout the year, they'll put out a lot of resources that you can go and look at yourself, to go look at examples and walkthroughs and things like that. But you can also sit down with a VC or an entrepreneur and go through your deck. We did that on multiple occasions and got a ton of good feedback from individuals.
And then Shawan, you were talking about a mentor. Ricardo, you mentioned a mentor in one of your other classes. Do these kind of relationships come up organically? Are they mostly things that come through structured formats in classrooms? How have you seen mentorship, advisor, sponsor relationships kind of develop across campus?
Yeah, for me, it was pretty organic. My professor reached out and said, hey, I wrote a book about founders of nonprofits. Do you want to connect with this one? And I said, yes, of course I do. And we had a call, we hit it off, and then he sent me a really kind email afterwards. And so I was like, okay, this person seems incredible. His name's Reed Saris, and I wanted to learn from him since his nonprofit has done great work in the education opportunity space. And so I just asked him, hey, do you want to be my mentor for the summer while I'm exploring this idea? And he agreed, and then we just continued working together from there. I think other people might do some cold emails to find mentors in a more formal sense, but for me, it was just organically talking to people and then see who you connect with and going from there.
Yeah, so there are formal processes for it that I went through in Startup Garage and Hacking for Defense, where you get matched up with a mentor. Those are also hit or miss, just like in normal life. If you go out and try to find a mentor, it can work sometimes and sometimes it doesn't. We were fortunate that one of the folks that was one of our mentors was amazing, and we hit it off, and the sessions were great. But there were examples when that wasn't quite the case. And then, so there are a lot of, examples that are more structured, but there are, to Siobhan's point, I actually did, probably the person who's helped me the most is somebody that I reached out to via cold email. I talked to a whole bunch of people, but that person was the one that I connected with the most. And I just kept, having more questions for and kept connecting with, and they agreed to, and they provided all sorts of guidance and things like that. And I think it can happen very organically as well, just as part of, if you're willing to be coached, you'll find someone.
Jacqueline, here's a question for you. How did you think about the cost of the MBA? So we're taking a whole left turn here, kind of coming back to the beginning of the journey. But how did you think about the cost of the MBA, including opportunity cost of leaving a lucrative career, finance, in the context of wanting to start a company? Like, how did you kind of approach that mentally?
Yeah, I'm not doing a startup because I think it's gonna make me a ton of money. I mean, that would be great as a side effect, but the reason I'm doing it is I think it's the best conduit for personal and professional growth. The actual content, I deal with IRS rules on taxability of benefits. When I was 5 years old, I did not dream. It's not like going to space. That was not my dream. But the lessons learned along the way are like why I wanted to do it to start with. And that's what sustains me when things get really tough and your first 5 or 10 customer calls and they tell you your idea is not great or they would never buy it or whatever it is. Like, I think that's what sustains me through it. So I didn't think of starting a company as like in the rational way I would say that you're presenting it that way. It was never for me about that. I think even if I had taken the money I invested in my MBA and said, I'm going to put it in a bank account and start spending that money, I don't think I would have had a clue on how to actually do that in a good way. I mean, like I said, I didn't have an idea. I didn't have a process. I didn't have a co-founder. And so those are other very important ingredients other than money for really to start something of your own. So I guess my answer is like, I didn't think about it in that way. And, if you have a fully fleshed out idea and all you really need is capital to make it work, yeah, I mean, I think you can make the case for that. But for me, it was about getting the other ingredients for starting a company.
And here's a question from Michael. Thinking about opportunities to continue working or launching something outside of the classroom during the academic year, is that possible? How do you juggle your time? Were you continuing to work on your ideas outside of the classroom, like after those classes have been over?
Yeah, definitely.
Go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, certainly. I think it's kind of, you manage your own time the way that you want to, and you kind of prioritize things as you see fit, right? I think you are advised not to work at a startup while you're doing your MBA, but there are people that do it, right? So people have done it and like they have great experiences and kind of learn a lot and have a lot of personal growth. And then there's tons of people that are working on ideas, whether they're doing it through coursework or not, and they spend a lot of time outside of school doing that. And being around your classmates helps quite a bit in terms of like, breaking down barriers that you're facing and all that as well.
Yeah, that hits on a lot of what I was going to bring up. It's hard, right, to work on your idea and also be a student and have a social life. But I think if you come in and you say, this is what I want to do, and I know I'm committed to at least exploring the idea, you block the time on your calendar before somebody else sends you an invite for an event. And for me, it was worth it. I said no to a lot of stuff at GSB so I could be off campus, going to schools and pilot my idea. But in the long run, it aligned with what I wanted to do after GSB. And I still had time to like make good friends and have fun and all of that. So it's not like you sacrifice everything. You just have to be a bit more intentional. The other thing is that there are a lot of classes where you can work on your venture and do things for the class. So basically any class that I was in, I found a way to tie it to vocal justice. So if I was in winning writing, that was a communications course, I would have my pitches be about vocal justice. If I were in my nonprofit management class, I would do research on a competitor that I needed to research anyway for vocal justice. And so it ends up being less work in the end, since you have a dual purpose for it.
And then Siobhan, did you do a low keynote as well?
Yes, I did a low keynote, which is a 9-minute talk on the issue you care about. And mine was related to vocal justice. It was on public speaking and critical consciousness. And I use that now to promote the organization.
These are also accessible. So if you go to YouTube and search low keynotes, you can also see what that looks like. So encourage folks to check that out as well. And then Jacqueline, did you pop off? Did you have a?
Nope, nothing.
All right, awesome. And so we're talking about like intentionality with time. I think that can also be an intentionality with opportunities. And question from Jay is like, how did you balance, driving towards that idea versus staying open and exploring like other things? Like any advice to someone who's grappling with those that same tension?
I think by being around classmates who are doing lots of different things, you're by default kind of open just from, dinner, like lunchtime, dinner time conversation, what's everyone interested in, what's everyone focused on. And so you'll just learn by default a lot of what other pursuits could look like. So I guess for me, I felt like it was very clear, like what the different flavors of, and if anything, I could draw inspiration from my classmates of like how they were pursuing it in their way. That gave me ideas on like, how I might inform my own process.
Nice.
One thing I would just add there quickly is that as long as you're committed to sort of either being an entrepreneur or joining a startup, I think things become way easier, because if you're also trying to recruit for like consulting and PE, then things become more difficult because you're basically recruiting the entire year. But if you commit to kind of being either an entrepreneur or going to work at a startup, then you have a ton of time to explore, right? You don't have to commit to something immediately. Or if you do commit to something for a month and you decide to pivot at the end of that, then it's not a waste of time because you still have more months to go, right? So I wouldn't be too concerned about that. It's more just making the decision between, am I going to go the traditional kind of consulting PE route, or am I going to go the entrepreneurship startup route?
And we're getting close to time. And so I'm going to go ahead and claim this last question. As you're thinking, words of wisdom to a younger you, whether it's in the application process, it's during your time at the GSB, maybe it's just as you graduated, as you're venturing out onto this whole new brave world ahead. Like, what advice would you give to yourself? So take a moment, and then maybe Ricardo, we could start with you, and Siobhan, then Jacqueline, to take us home.
Yeah, I would say, I mean, first and foremost, like breathe, right? It's like it's a bit of a long process, and it's super fun. It's really transformative from a personal and educational perspective. You're going to meet a ton of amazing people who you never thought you would be kind of rubbing elbows with and stuff. But just breathe for now, and just know that the world's going to be your oyster. Once you're here, you're going to have tons of opportunities to meet people, have conversations you never thought you'd have, and learn topics that you never thought you'd kind of be diving into.
Thank you. Siobhan.
I would say take time for yourself. And I think there are two ways to think about that. One is just time for you to breathe, relax, binge watch that show on Netflix, because the entrepreneurship journey is hectic. And so you got to just take that time and be diligent about taking care of yourself. But the other way I think about that is time for introspection. I think a lot of my best thinking comes when I'm just sitting by myself for a couple of hours and free writing about why I'm doing the work that I'm doing, what my values are, what some of my concerns are, and how I want to get better. And it's really hard to make that time on your own if you're just go with your venture. And so being diligent about having that time, maybe every 2 weeks, every month, to have some introspection, I think is important.
Awesome. And then Jacqueline, taking us home.
Well, the first Ricardo and Shawan's answers were both really good. It's all going to be fine. I would say have a plan and be patient. So I think for me, having a few areas of focus helped me make really easy, not easy, but like easier decisions given just the wealth of things you could be doing at the GSB. And your calendar will be booked end to end and probably double booked because there's so many cool things that you want to be doing. And so you need some level of focus of like what you want your experience to be oriented around, a few things, and really spend time on those two things. And then finally, I would say, I think one sense of feeling I had was like, oh, I see so-and-so doing this and that's really taking off, or I see so-and-so doing this and that's really taking off. And I think in hindsight, having a bit more patience with myself that like, for me, my entrepreneurship journey bloomed kind of post business school. And I wasn't one of the ones that kind of came in with a clear vision in mind. But it still kind of, worked out the way that it was meant to work out. So be patient and have a plan.
Wonderful. So breathe, take time for yourself, be patient, have a plan. These are all really, really wise words to live by. Definitely stuff that I'm going to be applying to my own life, even though I'm not in entrepreneurship at the moment. But with that, thank you so much to our panelists who took your time out today to spend with us. For those of you in the audience, if you haven't done so already, I would definitely encourage you to jump onto mystanford.mba. You can create a dashboard there, and with a few questions, we'll be able to help collect ideas, events that might be of interest to you. Speaking of events, beginning of August 2nd through 6th, we are hosting an application week to help you better understand the process. And so in doing that, to help you put your best foot forward, there was a lot of themes about process, and hopefully that is one place that we're going to be able to dig into that even more deeply. With that, thank you again for joining us, and we hope to see you across other events this summer. Stay safe. Hope to see you soon.